A golden haze settled over the midsummer gardens of Hawthorne House, where lantern light glowed like captured fireflies among the rose trellises and marble columns. Music drifted across the evening air, violins singing in bright, buoyant measures as couples whirled beneath silken banners. It was a night made for beauty, for promise, for the soft excitement of matchmaking and whispered futures. And yet, near the stone wall overgrown with ivy, stood the one woman no one expected to dazzle, though she was the quiet heart of the evening. She was nearly 30, with gentle features and a stillness that made her seem older than the bright, laughing girls around her. Her gown, a soft shade of dusk blue, was elegant but modest, the kind a woman wore who had learned not to call attention to herself. Her name was Eleanor, though most of her relatives referred to her simply as Aunt. The word was spoken carelessly, as though she were a fixture of the house rather than a guest in her own life. Tonight, she arranged bouquets, offered soft smiles, and ensured the younger girls were attended to, flattered, admired. She had become, by quiet habit, the one who eased the path for others, who polished the evening but never stepped into its light. Once, for a brief season of youth, she had been admired for her beauty and her kindness. Time had passed, expectations shifted, and the world had quietly placed her aside. She did not protest. Laughter chimed nearby. A group of girls, ribbons trailing from their hair, whispered behind feathered fans. Eleanor did not have to hear the words to know the tone, the meaning, the swift judgment. Poor thing, one murmured. Imagine waiting for someone who never comes. She does not wait, another replied with theatrical sympathy. She has accepted her fate. The spinster aunt. It is almost noble. Their laughter was not loud. It did not have to be. Eleanor kept her gaze fixed on the lanterns swinging gently from their cords, as though the warm light alone held her upright. A voice rose above the crowd. Her aunt, the matriarch of the evening, her tone thick with the sweetness one used for children and servants. Eleanor dear, she called, the children are restless upstairs. Do be a help and see them settled. There was no request in the statement. The task was given the way one sets aside an object no longer needed. Several guests turned, curious, sympathetic, even amused. Eleanor lowered her head. Of course. She stepped away from the veranda, careful to maintain her calm. Inside, there was only the quiet, familiar tightening of something pulled too often. Not humiliation. Only resignation worn smooth. She crossed the courtyard slowly, the music dimming behind her. The scent of roses lingered in the warm air. The evening sky deepened toward violet. If she allowed herself the indulgence, she might imagine that somewhere in the crowd, someone watched her with longing. But she did not indulge. Then carriage wheels broke softly over gravel. A hush rippled through the gathering. Who arrives this late? Was another guest invited? She paused at the stone steps and turned with the others. A dark, stately carriage slowed to a stop. The driver stepped down and opened the door with deliberate grace. From within emerged a man whose presence gathered attention like a magnet draws iron. Tall, broad-shouldered, his attire was impeccably formal, though touched by the weather of travel. His face held a quiet strength, a gravity that did not ask for respect but simply received it. Whispers stirred the air. The Duke has returned. I thought he was abroad. He is seeking a wife this season, they say. The Duke crossed the courtyard, greeted the hosts with polished courtesy, but his gaze was not occupied with them. Something in his eyes searched the gathering, assessing, measuring, not with vanity, but with the solemnity of a man long accustomed to silence and observation. Then his gaze found Eleanor. It was not the brief acknowledgement one gives a stranger in passing, nor the idle curiosity men cast toward women simply to confirm disinterest. It was something aware, focused. He looked at her as though she were the calm in a room full of noise. For a breath, Eleanor did not move. The air felt thinner, as though something long distant had arrived at last. Her instinct was to lower her eyes, to retreat into practiced invisibility. But his gaze steadied hers, not demanding, only present. Her aunt's voice cut sharply through the stillness. Eleanor, why are you lingering? The children. But the Duke spoke first, his voice even and quiet, directed solely to her. Forgive my intrusion upon your evening, he said. The words themselves were simple, yet the manner in which he offered them, courteous, sincere, was unlike anything she had received in years. Eleanor answered, her voice barely above the music. You interrupt nothing, Your Grace. The girls behind their fans fell silent. The hostess's smile grew thin. The Duke held her gaze one moment longer, as if acknowledging something unspoken between them, before he allowed himself to be drawn into the company of eager hosts and curious guests. Eleanor exhaled, though she had not realized she was holding her breath. Something trembled within her, not joy, not hope, but the faint stir of something long dormant. She turned once more toward the house, her steps quieter, her expression unchanged. But the atmosphere around her had shifted, subtle as the scent of rain before a storm. Behind her, whispers rose again. But this time they sounded different. And yet, something had begun to shift. Tonight. The morning after the garden fete dawned in gentle hues, the sky brushed with rose and gold. The household stirred early, for the Duke's arrival had unsettled the usual order of things. Servants moved with a quiet quickness, whispering as though sound itself might provoke speculation. Eleanor moved through the corridors with practiced calm, though a faint tremor lingered in her chest even now. She had not sought attention, nor encouraged the moment of connection the previous evening, yet something had unmistakably changed. At breakfast, the conversation was unusually animated. Her younger cousins spoke of gowns, invitations, and dances to come. Their eyes shone with hope and ambition. Eleanor sat among them, quietly pouring tea, arranging napkins, performing all the invisible tasks that made the morning appear effortless. She listened but did not contribute. She had learned that her voice mattered only when quiet. Then the footman entered with the morning post. Cards, letters, and invitations were handed about. The cousins giggled over embossed envelopes from eligible families. But then the footman paused beside Eleanor. "This arrived for you, miss?" There were no giggles then. Only a silence so delicate it might shatter. The envelope was sealed in deep green wax. The crest stamped into it was unmistakable, the Duke's family sigil. Her breath caught. She opened it slowly, careful not to seem eager. Inside lay no lengthy message, no bold declaration. Only a single piece of parchment and a pressed sprig of wildflower, starwort, pale and unassuming, gathered from the hedgerows behind the orchard. The note contained but one line. For one who sees what others overlook. No signature. None was required. Heat rose to her cheeks, not the warmth of vanity, but the quiet ache of being seen, acknowledged, remembered. The room held stillness like the held breath before thunder. Her aunt's voice broke it. "Starwort," she said too brightly. "How quaint. I suppose he felt sorry for you, child. The Duke is known for his gentle manners." Her cousins returned to their chatter, louder than before, too loud as though noise might drown implication. But the whispers began within hours. By afternoon the neighboring estate knew. By evening the village. By nightfall, the city would hear it through the slow braid of rumor. The Duke had sent a flower to the spinster aunt. Some said it was a gesture of courtesy. Some said pity. Some said courtship. Most said disbelief. Yet the Duke did not retreat into indifference. He was present at the next gathering, a hunt on the sprawling meadow, and though Eleanor did not join, his attention lingered upon the household in subtle but unmistakable ways. He spoke with her uncle regarding the estate's library. He walked the orchard path where starwort bloomed. He asked, politely without assumption, if Eleanor might attend the evening's dinner outdoors, where the day's warmth might linger just a little longer. The request was delivered through the hostess to preserve propriety. Even so, the household felt the weight of it. At the dinner, laughter and talk filled the long table beneath streaming banners. Glasses clinked, silver gleamed, and the sun dipped below the hills, leaving a flame of colors trailing in its wake. Eleanor sat near the far end, where she usually placed herself, present but unnoticed, until the Duke approached. He did not choose a seat beside her. That would have been bold, perhaps even reckless. Instead, he sat across from her, directly in her line of sight, close enough that their eyes could meet in the natural course of conversation. And they did. Often. Not always in speech, though they exchanged polite phrases, comments on the weather, the harvest, a recently published volume of poetry, but in something quieter. Something shared. A pause between words that spoke more than the words themselves. A stillness amid the clamor. She felt seen, not admired. Not claimed. See, that alone was astonishing. Others noticed, of course. Her cousin Lydia attempted laughter a shade too brightly, leaning forward to draw his gaze. Another adjusted her curls with delicate theatrics. A gentleman at the table made a joking remark, too loud, too pointed, about the Duke's tastes leaning toward the serene and seasoned rather than the youthful and lively. The table laughed. The Duke did not. His gaze remained steady, calm, unmoved. The rumors swelled by the next morning like a storm rolling over open fields. Some whispered Eleanor had contrived the Duke's interest through studied quietness and modesty. Some claimed he merely admired her skill with children. Some insisted it was temporary attention, nothing more, and would fade when the season shifted and brighter eyes glittered in new ballrooms. But no rumor carried as far or as fast as the scandal of the waltz. It occurred at the end-of-week ball held in the Great Hall, where chandeliers shimmered like stars caught in crystal. The music swelled, the dancers moving in a tide of silk and glimmering buttons. Eleanor stood at the edge of the floor as she often did, watching, unseen. The Duke crossed the room toward her with the quiet certainty of a man who required no approval to act. "May I have this dance?" he asked. He did not ask loudly. He did not bow dramatically. He simply offered his hand and waited. Every conversation at the edge of the room faltered. Fans paused midway. Eyes widened. Eleanor's breath faltered. Her pulse hammered. She had danced little these past years, too aware of how eyes counted, compared, dismissed. Yet something in his gaze steadied her. She placed her hand in his. The music began. Their steps were measured, graceful, familiar once they began to move. She had not forgotten how to follow a rhythm, she had only forgotten how it felt to be part of one. His hand was firm and warm at her back, guiding, not claiming. Their steps matched not by practiced repetition but by quiet understanding. The ballroom watched. Some in wonder, some in disdain, some in disbelief that such a woman could hold the attention of such a man. Whispers carried sharp as glass along the floor. Perhaps she has ensnared him. Perhaps he is bored. Perhaps it is charity. But no whisper could pierce the quiet that formed between the two who danced. At the final turn, the music softened. The Duke bowed. Eleanor curtsied. And for a single breath, the room waited for something more. Some sign, some declaration, some proof. It did not come. He released her hand gently and stepped away, returning to propriety with practiced ease. Yet the scandal had already ignited. By nightfall it would be everywhere. And Eleanor, though her heart trembled like a leaf in a sudden wind, understood that her life had shifted onto a path she had never permitted herself to imagine. Something had begun. And the world was not ready for it. The rain had begun just after dusk, a sudden downpour that swept across the land like a curtain drawn over the evening. Guests who had intended to return to their carriages were forced to remain, and the great house hummed with restless conversation. Fireplaces crackled in every room, though the heat did little to ease the tension that had gathered over the past week. The rumor of the Duke's dance with Eleanor had not faded. It had grown sharper, heavier, and now it clung to every corridor like smoke. Eleanor had borne it all with measured composure. She served tea when called upon, listened to idle chatter, and kept her eyes lowered when remarks turned pointed. But that evening, after hearing Lydia laugh softly as she told a circle of young women that Eleanor had likely misunderstood the Duke's kindness, something within her trembled, not with anger but with weariness. She slipped away quietly, seeking the conservatory at the far end of the house. The glass walls swept up into a curved roof, and the rain drummed upon it in a steady rhythm. Lanterns cast a pale, warm glow through the leaves of ferns and creeping vines. Roses, carefully cultivated even in the harsher seasons, perfumed the air. The place felt untouched by gossip or expectation, as though the world could not find her here. She rested her hand upon the cool marble edge of the fountain at the center, watching drops of water ring outward from the carved stone lilies. Her breath was slow, controlled, but her heart carried a weight that felt close to breaking. She was tired of being overlooked, tired of being spoken about as though she were furniture in a room built for others. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps, quiet, deliberate. She did not turn. She already knew who had found her. The Duke's reflection appeared in the glass beside her, blurred by the rain streaking the panes. His posture was composed, his expression unreadable, though the faint furrow of his brow suggested concern rather than presumption. "I feared you might hide yourself away tonight," he said softly. Eleanor exhaled a faint breath. "I did not hide. I simply sought quiet." "Quiet can be a refuge," he replied, stepping closer, but not so near as to crowd her. "And a prison." She turned then, slowly, her gaze steady though her pulse raced. "If I am imprisoned, Your Grace, it is by the world that has already written my story for me. I merely live within its margins." His eyes softened. "I do not believe that to be true." "No." Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. "You have seen how they look at me. How they speak when they think I cannot hear. I am a cautionary tale to them, a reminder of what becomes of a woman who does not secure her future when she is still young enough to be desired." He stepped nearer, and this time the movement was deliberate. "Desire has little to do with youth." She did not look away. "Perhaps not for you." The rain kept its steady rhythm, a muted percussion against the glass overhead. He considered her for a long moment. I have lived among courts and armies, among men who perform emotion and men who flee it. I have seen affection worn as a mask and marriage used as a weapon. Very few people have ever spoken to me without pretense. And you believe I have? She asked quietly. I know you have. Her breath faltered, not with fear but with the quiet ache of being understood. Then you also know that I do not understand your intentions. I cannot afford to misunderstand them. He looked down, studying the marble beneath their feet, as though gathering his thoughts before speaking. When he raised his gaze again, it held something unguarded. I once loved someone, he said. Before I inherited the title. Before my name carried weight. She loved the idea of who I might become. Not the man I was. Eleanor said nothing, allowing the silence to hold his confession. When I returned home after years abroad, he continued, I found myself surrounded by people who see only what they want. Position. Advantage. Proximity to power. No one looks at me and sees a man who wakes before dawn because sleep does not come easily. No one wonders whether I am lonely. His voice did not waver, yet something in it spoke of wounds that had not fully healed. Eleanor's throat tightened. Loneliness is not unfamiliar to me. He lifted his eyes to hers again, and in that shared recognition, quiet, unspoken, profound, something shifted. You asked why I look at you, he said. Why I seek your conversation, why I notice when you leave a room. It is because when you speak, you do not measure your words to impress. You do not reach for affection. You are simply yourself. She lowered her gaze, not in submission but in vulnerability. And yet, I fear what may come of being seen. That fear is not yours alone. His voice was low, sincere. If I step forward, the world will tear my choice apart. They will speak of age, of suitability, of ambition. They will say I chose poorly. And if I step forward, she whispered, they will say I am desperate. The rain grew harder, thrumming like distant hooves across the glass. They stood close now, close enough to see breath stir in the softened air. Yet the space between them remained untouched, sacred. What is it you fear most? He asked. That I will hope, she answered barely aloud, and find myself mistaken. He exhaled slowly as though the words reached him somewhere deep. Then allow me to speak plainly. I do not offer pity, nor politeness, nor a passing fancy. I offer attention, consideration, time, if you will allow it. Time. The one thing everyone had told her she no longer possessed. Eleanor lifted her chin. Her voice steadied. I cannot promise what I do not yet understand. But I will not run. A faint, quiet warmth touched his expression, not triumph but relief. Then we are agreed, he said. A distant door opened at the far end of the conservatory, voices echoed faintly. The spell of privacy would soon break. But something had been spoken which could not be undone. No declaration had been made. No vow exchanged. And yet the world had shifted. Not in thunder. Not in spectacle. But in the quiet decision of two souls who recognized loneliness in the other, and dared to answer it. The morning after their conversation in the conservatory brought no peace. If anything, the world appeared more watchful than before. Eleanor felt eyes upon her wherever she stepped, accompanied by murmurs just soft enough to feign politeness. What had once been mere disinterest had grown into scrutiny sharpened by curiosity and quiet resentment. The Duke's attention had unsettled the balance within the household and beyond. Over breakfast, her aunt offered smiles that cut like polished steel. You seem flushed, my dear. One hopes you have not grown too attached to passing gestures of courtesy. The cousins watched her with hungry interest, eager for judgment. Eleanor folded her hands atop her lap, feeling the weight of every unspoken assumption settle upon her shoulders. She did not allow her composure to falter, though her heart carried the memory of moonlight and rain. The Duke did not appear that morning. He had left early to attend to matters in the county, but his absence only sharpened the whispers. Her aunt, determined to steer the narrative, called upon an evening gathering of neighbors, as though to prove nothing had changed. But something had. The knowledge lived inside Eleanor like a flame, steady yet vulnerable. When the guests arrived, the parlor swelled with the fragrance of spiced wine and polished wood. Eleanor took her place, intending to observe rather than invite conversation. Yet conversation found her regardless. Lydia drifted to her side with a smile too sweet to be sincere. You have caused stir, Lydia murmured. Some say the Duke's interest is noble. Others, well. Her gaze flickered toward a cluster of women near the mantel. I only hope you do not find yourself disappointed. Eleanor steadied herself. Disappointment is familiar company. I fear no reintroduction. Lydia blinked and retreated. The evening progressed. Card tables opened, musicians tuned instruments, and wine flowed. The door opened once more, and with it entered a presence that altered the room in a breath. The Duke had returned. Nothing in his expression suggested urgency. Yet the room shifted around him, conversations faltering. He greeted the room as courtesy demanded, but his eyes sought only one person. Eleanor stood, though she did not remember deciding to. He approached with a measured step, offering a bow free of apology. "Miss Eleanor," he said, "might I request a moment of your company?" No one spoke. The entire room listened. Her aunt stepped forward, voice bright. "Your Grace, perhaps refreshments?" "I have already eaten," he replied without removing his gaze from Eleanor. The air held stillness. She inclined her head. "Of course." They left the parlor beneath a sea of widening eyes, crossing into the hall where candlelight flickered against polished panels. Though out of earshot, Eleanor sensed the house leaning behind them. He stopped near a window overlooking rain-damp gardens. The storm had passed, leaving the world smelling of wet earth. "I was told whispers have grown in my absence," he began. "They have," Eleanor answered softly. "And do they wound you?" "Not in the way others might expect. I have lived long in the shadows of judgment. But what I fear is misunderstanding. I do not wish the world to believe I have attached myself to your name without your consent." "My consent," he said, "is freely given." Her breath caught. Still she did not relent. Words spoken in private will not quiet a world determined to see folly. Then allow them to hear otherwise. His voice held resolve. "I will speak where all may witness. And I will do so now." Now. The word escaped her. "If courage is required, it must not wait. If I say no, then I will remain silent. But I will not withdraw what I feel." Time stretched. She lifted her chin. "Very well." They re-entered the parlor. Conversation faltered. The Duke stepped forward, not to Eleanor but to her uncle, the head of the household. "Sir," he said, voice even but carrying, "I request permission to formally court Miss Eleanor." Gasps flickered. A glass struck a table. Lydia's fan fell from her hand. Her aunt recovered first, smile stretched. "Surely this is premature. There are many considerations." "There is only one," he said, turning toward Eleanor. "Her willingness." The room held its breath. Eleanor felt every heartbeat. She spoke, voice clear though quiet. "I would accept such a courtship." In that instant something fractured. Not within her, but within the room. Approval shattered like glass. The cousins stared, stunned. Lydia's expression twisted between disbelief and envy. Her aunt wore a smile without warmth. Yet Eleanor did not look at any of them. She looked only at the Duke, who inclined his head, not in triumph but in gratitude. The reaction did not end at shock. Conversations resumed in stilted bursts, each sentence crafted to avoid revealing the speaker's true thoughts. Yet truth flickered plainly in every glance. Some looked upon Eleanor with new calculation, wondering what advantage she held. Others stared with disbelief, unable to reconcile the woman they had dismissed with the one now chosen. Her aunt approached her with a measured smile. "You must understand," she whispered sharply, "that such attention brings responsibility, expectations. You are not prepared for such scrutiny." Eleanor met her gaze with steadiness. "I have already lived under scrutiny. I will not shrink simply because it has changed shape." The Duke bowed once more to the room, maintaining the dignity required of his position. Yet his eyes found Eleanor again, and in them she saw not possession but promise. When the evening concluded and the guests departed, the house settled into quiet. Lanterns dimmed. Doors closed. Eleanor stood at the foot of the stairs, night settling around her like a cloak newly fitted to her shoulders. Change had come. And the world, accustomed to overlooking her, would soon reckon with the cost of its blindness. The winter ball arrived beneath a sky of pale frost, the air sharp enough to frost every lantern flame. Guests from neighboring counties traveled by carriage and sleigh, their wheels crunching over frozen gravel, eager to witness the spectacle it had become. Eleanor stood at her mirror before the evening began, adjusting the simple pearl clasp at her throat. Her gown was of soft ivory, not extravagant but made with care. It suited her in a way that did not demand the room's admiration, but quietly invited it. She felt no triumph, only a calm that came from choosing to be seen rather than hidden. If the world wished to watch, then let it. Her aunt's expression was unreadable, though her lips curved in a smile polished to gentility. "You look well, my dear," she offered, though her tone lacked warmth. Eleanor only nodded, for the point of the night was not her aunt, nor the whispers, nor any who watched. It was whether she possessed the courage to stand where she had once stepped back. The ballroom shimmered like a vision. Snow fell beyond the tall windows in drifting flakes, while within musicians tuned their instruments to a soft, stirring cadence. Pine boughs lined the banisters, all poised for something to unfold. Eleanor stepped into the room with her chin lifted, though her heart beat like a bird's wing. The Duke had not yet arrived. Whispers bloomed across the polished floor. Perhaps he thought better of it. Perhaps he has chosen more suitably. It was always unlikely. Eleanor felt the old ache at those words, but she did not retreat. She walked toward the far side of the room, where winter roses were arranged around a marble statue. She touched a petal, letting the quiet settle her. The doors opened. The Duke entered without flourish. His coat was midnight black, his cravat tied with precise simplicity. Yet he carried purpose, quiet, unwavering. His gaze swept once across the room, only long enough to acknowledge it. Then he saw her. Their eyes met across the ballroom. He crossed the floor with measured steps. When he reached her, he bowed with sincerity. "Good evening," he said. "Good evening," she answered. The first notes of the waltz began. He extended his hand. Not with command. With invitation. "Will you dance with me?" She placed her hand in his. They moved together, not with the practiced elegance of performance, but with the unspoken understanding of two who had already met in vulnerability. The Duke guided her through each turn as though the world beyond the music held no claim on them. Eleanor felt her fears dissolve, not vanishing entirely but loosening their grip. Around them, whispers rose again, but not as sharp as before. "She is composed." He looks at her as if, "No, it cannot be love." Yet the whispers could not breach her. As the dance reached its final turn, the Duke leaned slightly closer, just enough that only she could hear. "I have walked through rooms filled with people and felt alone," he said. "But not with you. And I have lived believing I had missed every chance," she replied softly. "Yet here I stand." The music faded. They remained close for a breath longer, then parted with grace. Her uncle approached, solemn, aware of every watching eye. "Your Grace," he said, "you have made your intentions known. Will you speak them plainly?" The Duke turned to the room, though his hand remained steady at Eleanor's back. "Yes." The ballroom stilled. "I do not offer admiration born of novelty, nor affection born of expectation," he said. "I offer respect. I offer companionship. I offer the wish to share the quiet and the difficult and the days yet to come with one who sees the world with depth and kindness." His gaze returned to Eleanor. "I ask her permission to court her openly, with the intention of offering my hand in marriage should she accept." Silence settled, deep, listening. Eleanor's heart beat once, twice, steady as truth. She thought not of gossip or envy or expectation. She thought of a garden wall, where she once stood believing herself unseen. "I accept," she said. Not loudly, but clearly. The room exhaled. Some with wonder, some with disbelief, a few with awe that they had misjudged her so completely. The Duke bowed his head, not in triumph but in gratitude. They stood together not as spectacle, not as scandal, but as two souls who had chosen one another in a world that had decided for them long ago. And beyond the tall windows, snow whispered against the glass as if listening.